Good evening. Welcome back to the channel. It's February 8th. There were several stories today that I wanted to cover. And instead of making separate videos, we're going to do one. And cover a bunch of things that are going on right now in the world of the Charismania and the church. We're going to talk about the latest disinformation attack led against the bishop from the Episcopal Church. We're going to talk about the new faith office that the president has created and his installation of Paula White as the director of it. I'm going to get into the apology from Sam Storms over the Bicklegate report that dropped this week. And then probably cover a recently absurd pitch from Charismania that is portraying Donald Trump as a modern day Nehemiah. So let's start with the bishop story. For those who aren't aware, back in the inauguration, after the inauguration, they have a traditional prayer service the next morning, I believe, held at the Washington, D.C. Episcopalian Church. And at this church, the sermon was delivered by Bishop Budde. And she made a plea at the end of her sermonette directly to the president, asking for mercy. And this, of course, made the NAR apoplectic because you can't challenge the idol in their idolatry. The notion that somehow requesting for somebody to be merciful would cause this much drama is only a statement for how far gone the apostate church is today. That being said, once this occurred, it unleashed a torrent of abuse and disinformation toward Bishop Budde, and Christians seem to embrace it because the NAR preaches a lot of hate. And before we get into the meat of this, I want to address the whataboutisms that always occur in the story. So it is 100% correct that the Episcopalian Church is entirely liberal. They support many liberal causes that don't align correctly with Scripture. There's no issue. I take no issue with that. If somebody simply wanted to say, that maybe this service shouldn't have been held there, or that somehow the Episcopalian Church is too liberal, there'd be no argument for me. That's not what we're talking about. Even within their liberalism, requesting the president to be merciful pretty much aligns with the cause of Christ. So even if the vessel is imperfect. So, if that's the first thing that jumps to your mind, or the second thing, which is that the Bible forbids women from being pastors, or in this case, bishops, which is also scripturally correct. That would be a separate point that has nothing to do with the plea for mercy. So, a census occurred, which was 3 weeks ago. There has been quite a lot of kerfuffle as the NAR and the Republican Party tries desperately to paint her as, somehow doing something really evil or satanic because, apparently Jesus was not merciful. The entire premise is so unbiblical. It's kind of staggering. That said, today I woke up and there was a new slanderous angle, which I had noted on a few Facebook posts and a few articles in my research. It primarily was being propagated through the usual right-wing fake media. And, in this age of digital media, once a story goes and then memes are created, and then they mobilize the apostate church, who just starts posting this stuff all over the web. And before you know it, the disinformation is widely accepted. So it took a little while, but Charisma joined the party. This morning at 10:23, we see this article. Woke Bishop exposed, Trump critic caught pocketing millions in taxpayer money. Their source for this is the Gateway Pundit, which is not a news source. It is a right-wing propaganda machine. So the angle that they're going for here is that because the Episcopalian Church runs something called the EMM, which is I know the last two things are migrant ministries. So basically, they try to help out in resettlement, and it's important to realize the difference. Resettlement is not dealing with illegal aliens; it's dealing with people who have been approved for asylum or refugee status, and they help them resettle, basically. So these are people who have been crushed in their part of the world of their lives. We would think through a compassionate reading of the gospel that we would be okay with somebody helping them resettle. But not if it goes against the idol and the idolatry, which is Mr. Trump. So the conspiracy theory goes a little something like this. Because the EMM apparently that's the language they use, was provided with about $53 million of taxpayer funds in 2023, which, by the way, I haven't been able to verify if it's true, so I'm going to assume it's true, that somehow the reason why Budde made the plea for mercy for migrants is that somehow this furthers her bottom line, that she did it strictly for the money, if you will. In fact, I mean, the title of this ridiculous article is Trump critic caught pocketing millions in taxpayer money. So let's deal with some of the facts. The EMM was created in the 1980s, way before Bishop Budde rose to the current position that she has. Number two, she doesn't run the EMM. From what I can gather, her entire involvement in the EMM is the fact that that's run by the Episcopalian Church, and she is part of the Episcopalian Church. So to say that she's caught pocketing millions in taxpayer money is what's known as bearing false witness. It is beyond a smear. It is designed, obviously, to be disinformation and to get people to think, which, by the way, is what's going on every single day, right? It's Elon Musk pretending that the Department of Education has no use. Well, now that the Department of Education has been effectively shut down, I sincerely hope you don't have any special needs children, because all of their services are funded through the Department of Education. This notion that we're just going to give all the money to the states does not completely comprehend the fact that some states would not handle that correctly. So the state of Florida, for example, 2 years ago, included in the curriculum that slavery had positive aspects for the African American. That's not factually correct. Now, maybe you're cool with that. Maybe you're cool with, teaching your children things that are factually incorrect and kind of rude to entire swaths of people who are also your brothers and sisters. But I'm pretty sure Jesus isn't. But that's fine. There'll be legal challenges to that, and it'll play out in the court, just like when they now are apparently targeting the Consumer Finance Protection Board, which sole purpose is to protect consumers. So it seems that that's the next thing that Mr. Musk is going to shut down. And the first one, of course, is the USAID, which has generated all of these kind of fake stories about, fraud, which is not. USAID is designed to provide services and mercy, quite frankly, abroad. But we also do it for our own personal, well-being. It's in our best interest for the world to view America positively. So when we combat the spread of AIDS in Africa, or that we try to stop the spread of Ebola through the world. That's all done through the USAID, AID, which is now no longer functioning. They've essentially stopped all the payments. So you may say, well, what do I care? Which would be very unchristian to begin with. But you should care, because then it increases the likelihood that somebody from one of these countries gets on a plane and comes to America with Ebola, because we didn't do anything to help the poorer country combat it. So now, were there things that were being funded that this administration would disagree with? Absolutely. And that's what happens when a new administration comes in. They review the priorities of the previous administration, they change them, which is based upon what the people voted for. So, if there is, services to promote the protections for the LGBTQ community across the world, and Mr. Trump says that that's no longer America's focus, then he has every right to go back to Congress, who actually allocates the money, and change what the priorities are. What he does not have the legal right to do is to simply shut the agency down and essentially, screw over the entire world. And it's not hyperbole. People are going to die because of this. So, that all said, getting back to Bishop Budde. So, the section here from the Charisma News article says, the hypocrisy is glaring while Bishop Budde's moral posturing calls for social justice. Her organization's deep entanglement with federal funds raises uncomfortable questions about the true motivations of the advocacy. I mean, are you serious? This is like the same stupid argument that Elon Musk used when he essentially shut down all of the money that goes to the Lutheran Church to help people in this country, the least in society, which last time I checked is the number one topic in the Bible after salvation. So, and it says here, the New York Post, which by the way is owned by Rupert Murdoch and has a clear political bent, detailed in 2024 that EMM sponsored, quote, air quotes for some reason, 64 individuals from 48 countries, including Afghans under special humanitarian programs and refugees from Democratic Republic of Congo. I mean, I don't know the details on the Congo one, but the Afghan one, which is being applied here, why is Charisma pointing out that it includes Afghans under special humanitarian programs? Because it's trying to, again, spread like Muslim hate. And the bottom line is the Afghans in this program that actually received the resettlement are the people that helped us when we were occupying Afghanistan and fighting a war. They couldn't stay there or they would get killed by their own people. So we did the right thing as a country and we took them in as refugees. And all that happened is the EMM from the Episcopalian Church helped them resettle. So, and by the way, again, if the administration for some reason doesn't want to give it to the Episcopalian Church, that's fine also. That's within their right. They have to go back to Congress and do that. But it does, the main story here is, again, the actual hypocrisy of people in the church who are going to sit here and create disinformation, and then they let you, the people who follow their posts and tweets and whatnot, spread the disinformation for them in the name of Jesus. So, which is, reading another section from the article, in exposing Bishop Budde's financial dealings. It's not her financial dealings. Okay, that is beyond stupid. Okay, she is a bishop in the Episcopalian Church. The Episcopalian Church runs a migrant service that receives government funding in order to provide those services. That's it. It's not her financial dealings. So everything that the way Charisma words this is false, a lie, and bearing false witness. She says a broader pattern emerges, one where the lines between advocacy and avarice blur. Avarice is greed. So the accusation being made here by Charisma News is that Bishop Budde somehow is motivated purely out of greed for an organization that she is not in charge of. And I don't even know if she has any direct involvement in, simply because she works for the church that runs that organization. And then they quote Matthew 23:27. Jesus condemns the religious leaders of his day, saying, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! You're like whitewashed tombs, which indeed appear beautiful outwardly, but inside full of dead men's bones and uncleanliness." This stark warning reflects the peril of outward righteousness masking inner corruption. Yeah, that shouldn't be a point of solace for you, Charisma News, because you're the one who's masking your inner corruption. Luke 12:2-3 further declares, "For there is nothing covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known." The point being here again is, this is a lie. It's an insidious lie. It is bearing false witness. If you want to have a separate conversation about the Episcopalian Church in general, I'm with you. That does not give you the right to spread lies and disinformation in the name of Jesus, because the world, who does see the things of God as foolishness, does not see the things of carnality as foolishness. They can see what this is. They can see what's going on. And we need to, as a church, stop being stupid. We need to stop being the ones who are so easily manipulated and duped. This lie was concocted in the bowels of some right-wing think tank. They spread it out to their NAR leaders, who then spread it out on their lists, on their Twitter followers and whatnot. And now it's out of control. It's like a virus that is spreading through. And by the way, this is like in the last day and a half. So most people who just consume their media through like the titles, again, the title here being that the woke bishop, which is a ridiculous phrase, is exposed for pocketing millions in taxpayer money, as if she put it in her pocket. It's just, I mean, imagine if this, was you or a friend of yours who genuinely, even if you disagree with the focus on helping refugees resettle, there's a mechanism for addressing that with and through Congress. The mechanism is not lying and bearing false witness. And we really should know better as a church. But we don't. And moving on to the next story, as you see the picture there of Paula White King, who was announced yesterday, as the new White House faith leader. So President Trump created this kind of fake office where they're going to combat what they call, bias against Christians in this country, which is a non-existent thing. There is no bias against Christians in this country. This is the most freest country in the history of the world. What there is a bias against is people trying to shove their religion down the throats of other people. And by the way, I know this is going to come as a shock to many people who don't realize how much they're influenced by NAR teaching. Jesus never asked us to create a theocracy. Despite the abuse of history by people in the NAR, this country was not founded on Christian principles. Most of the leaders, the founding fathers, were deists. What is a deist? Well, they believe in a higher power, but they do not necessarily ascribe that to the Jesus of the Bible. Thomas Jefferson rewrote the Bible and removed all indications of the deity of Jesus Christ because he did not believe he was the Son of God. So, again, is America the best secular experiment in government in the history of mankind? Yeah, I would say that. I think that we've done a lot of good, but that doesn't negate what we've done bad or wrong. And so this notion again that somehow, we're being oppressed is part of the NAR victimization model. It gets the Christians feeling like they're always being attacked when it's the furthest thing from the truth. Yet we have so much freedom in this country to worship strictly just alone based on the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. So, but at any rate, President Trump nominated or named, I should say, Paula White King. So now, in fairness, there has been a fair amount of pushback. There has been a fair amount, even within the apostate church circles. There's been a fair amount of folks who correctly view Paula White King as the heretic that she is. But this shouldn't come as a surprise. That she was his spiritual advisor in the first administration that he had. And if you understand like who we're dealing with, like I understand why, because Paula White Cain's theology is exactly Donald Trump's theology. They worship the same thing, and that's money. Paula White Cain, who's thrice married, has fleeced $5 million from the flock of God. And she's done it through very insidious and relatively stupid ways. So, like, I did a devotional one time because she had sent out a fundraiser where she said, I believe it was First Chronicles 22:9, meant that God was telling you to send her $229. I kid you not. That's who's in charge of the national, the faith office in the White House. So it should be an indication to the church of exactly how apostate we have become. It should be a sign to the church that maybe we shouldn't be idolizing the current president. And we'll see in another story coming up soon the lengths that we go to idolize him, to make President Trump an idol. We've all heard through the years Charisma basically promoting the idea that Donald Trump was the second coming of King Cyrus. Then he was the second coming of King Jehu. Then he had a Deborah anointing and an Elijah mantle. Just the day after the inauguration, Pastor Mark Driscoll, who is somebody who fled biblical judgment, who was supposed to get disciplined by his church, and he packed up his stuff in the middle of the night and ran away after he stole $200,000 in tithe money to hire a company to cheat the New York Times bestseller list so he can look like he was a top 10 bestseller, which obviously provides him more bottom line money. Mark Driscoll tweeted the day after the inauguration, Elijah is back in the White House. Now, I'm sure some may look at that and just think it's hyperbole, but no, this is what he believes. So, and then it turns out that today, and we'll be covering this in a second, is the latest thing is now Donald Trump is being compared, or it's being floated that he might be a modern day Nehemiah. So, and I think we're compelled at this point to remember who we're dealing with. Donald Trump is a convicted rapist. That's not like an opinion. It's a fact. He's convicted of 34 other felonies. And please, do not get into the nonsense about how, it was lawfare, or, he never should have been. He was charged. We have a system of judgment and justice in this country. He sat, and evidence was heard by a jury of his peers, and they convicted him 34 times. There's no getting around it. That's a fact. 6 bankruptcies. 3 wives. Cheated on his first wife, his second wife, his third wife with a porn star. I'm not suggesting from a political standpoint that you can't decide that he is the best option, or the lesser evil is actually the best way to put it. Just don't lose sight of the fact that you're still advocating for evil, one way or the other. So, so the deification of Trump, continues, and his announcing Paula White. And by the way, the picture that I saw where they were all praying over him included heretics like Jensen Franklin, obviously Franklin Graham, who's nothing more than a political shill, who pulls down over $1 million in salary per year from the 2 charities that he runs. I think I saw Sammy Rodriguez, who basically, sold out his own people last week by writing an article siding with the ICE raids. And Malachi O'Brien, I believe, was there. And Malachi is the idiot that anointed Greg Locke, an apostle, and his wife, who they're both adulterers, by the way, because Mr. Locke cheated with his secretary on his wife, then divorced his wife and married his secretary. And Malachi O'Brien thought nothing of anointing him an apostle. So, but we don't care. Like, there's not enough people who look at those pictures or look at, Paula White basically having the ear of the president, and they're willing to look the other way. I mean, I read some comments today from, Christians, and by the way, on discernment ministry websites, not even on Charisma, and basically saying, oh, I don't blame Trump. Yeah, he doesn't know any better. Yeah, but you do, or at least you should. And, it's like, I remember when John MacArthur, who's obviously very well respected, during COVID, his church ran into the same problem that all churches ran into, which is the purpose-driven church model does not allow for people to sit home. They have to come to the weekly service in order to tithe. And without the tithe, which, by the way, only 10% of people tithe to begin with, which is always ironic, because it's kind of a tithe of a tithe. But he reopened his church. He stuck his thumb in the eyes of the state authority that told him not to. He did it anyway. By the way, he contracted COVID and almost died from it. And who knows how many people that he basically fed into the COVID wood chipper through these actions. And then he was asked at the time to interview by, I think, Stephen Strang, or at least it was Charisma News, one way or the other. And he did it. And, it just amazed me that somebody who's that learned biblically and that grounded biblically thought nothing of like who he was sharing the stage with. And that, if I ever find myself on the same side as Charisma News, I think I need to check the side I'm on. It's not, I mean, they're not occasionally right. they're wrong. And if you see that Donald Trump is surrounding himself with Paula White, Kane, Jensen Franklin, Sammy Rodriguez, Franklin Graham, these should be like flashing red warning signs to you that maybe you need to check whether or not you're actually in a cult and following idolatry, as opposed to thinking that you're really pursuing the cause of Jesus Christ. Third story, and we'll thankfully move off of politics. And instead, we're going to go to the page, or the webpage of Sam Storms. So Sam Storms said back in April of 2023, when he was at the round table for American Gospel, referring to Mike Bickle. I know this man to the depths of his soul. I cannot think of a more biblically orthodox, humble, Christ-exalting individual who lives an incredibly simple lifestyle. So when I hear people say that he's a false teacher, it angers me, because I know the individual. I know the man personally. He's not NAR, and has been claimed by so many because he has openly defied it. Yeah, I guess that didn't age very well, that quote. For those who may have missed it, and if so, I'm not sure what country you were in, but the Bicklegate report from Firefly, the organization that did the investigation, dropped this week. And it was staggering. It revealed no less than 17 victims throughout the decades, specifically of Mr. Bickle. Now, there wasn't any new revelations that were mind-blowing, because the worst ones had already been revealed. The one that was 12 years old, the one that was 13 years old, and of course the Jane Doe, who has now been identified as Deborah Perkins. I wrote a devotional about this after the report dropped, and the angle I took was more along the lines of the immense problems at IHOP KC in general. The fact that there were 16 staff persons identified as also being accused of sexual assault during this time. The cover-ups. I don't want people to forget what happened when the story broke. When this story broke, the initial defense mechanisms kicked in. Everybody was saying it's not true, it's not possible. The leadership of IHOP KC lied to everybody. They brought Michael Brown in to lie to everybody and to basically chastise them. You shouldn't be talking about this on social media, because they want to control the information. That's why they use things like the verses where you're supposed to confront the person in Matthew 18, I think, because that allows them to control the information. And then, of course, they had to get rid of that leadership group. They brought in another leadership group, but they kept attacking the advocacy group that was supporting the women, saying that they were just performing a church coup, and they wanted to basically steal Mike Bickle's kingdom. They referred to the victims as being manipulated and used by Satan. And then the story, then they brought in Eric Valls, the spin doctor, who basically lied on, over and over again for what I think the 2 months that he was there. His sole job was to try to salvage what he could. They pretended to do a fake investigation by hiring somebody in their congregation who didn't even interview the victims because the victims wanted no part of her. And then it came out about the 12-year-old and 13-year-old, and suddenly everybody started moonwalking away from Bickle. Well, not everybody. Stephen Strang still advocated that he should be restored, even after the knowledge of the 2 minors. And I don't want anybody to forget that, because all these people, they all got to go. The bottom line is IOPKC needs to be burned to the ground. And you may think that it already has been. It's not. The 24/7 prayer movement, which has been demonic from day one, needs to go as well. We now know that Mike Bickle lied about the entire prophetic history of IOPKC. God never spoke to him, never spoke to Paul Cain, never spoke to Bob Jones, who, by the way, both of them are also sexual abusers of women. So it's not surprising that the 3 of these, deviants cooked up the IHOP-KC model. And basically, if you read this report, it is horrific what they did to these kids who came in just to follow God, just to seek God, just to get closer to God. And what they were greeted with was disgusting. And then when they actually had the nerve to tell their superiors that they had been raped or they had been sexually abused, they were made to go into Matthew 18 meetings with their accuser. And in some cases, they were told, oh, well, he repented, so, you got to forgive him because that's what the Bible says, and you shouldn't tell anybody, including your parents. So somebody like Mike Bickle, who, by the way, he's completely responsible for all the actions that he did, but he's gone already. He ain't coming back. Thank God for that. But the other people, because there's no way he could have done this over 4 decades without people knowing and doing nothing about it. It's the same thing we saw with Rabbi Zacharias, where everybody was saying, oh, what could we have done? Like, everybody knew that he was taking all of these, like, masseuses on, like, overseas trips with no, like, supervision or whatnot. And nobody had the guts to stand up to him because he was the cult of personality leader. So that being said, Sam Storms puts out a heartfelt apology to the body of Christ. I want to have grace. I really do. I don't know, Sam. The quote I read is very disturbing to me because what it reveals is somebody who could not have possibly allowed himself to see anything negative about the man he was deifying, the man he was exalting. Because how do you think that somebody who is a serial abuser of women and children is the most biblically orthodox person you've ever met? It doesn't speak well for your discernment. It just doesn't. But a lot of what he wrote here sounds right. He sounds genuinely contrite. I can't speak to whether or not he really is, or whether this is spin to try to, like, basically save his reputation. He says, like, he apologizes and he repents and he asks forgiveness for a whole bunch of things, for a whole bunch of people. And I gotta say that the language appears perfectly acceptable. And we do forgive. If he genuinely, reflected on the situation and saw the level of deception that he was under and how he contributed to other people's deception then and other people's hurt and pain and loss of money and loss of innocence. And now he genuinely is apologizing, repenting. Kudos to him, in my opinion. And I think as Christians, considering how much has been forgiven of us, it's easy for me to forgive Sam. Sam didn't do anything to me. The individual victims of IHOP-KC will have to decide for themselves. I just want to focus on one thing, and that's this. However, this is from his statement. However, I also want to acknowledge the spiritual blessings and growth that many of you experienced during your time at IHOP-KC at Forerunner Church, which is the church for IHOP-KC. In spite of what has been revealed of Bickle's behavior, I'm sure there are people who look back on their time with Kansas City with fond memories and gratitude for what God did in their lives. What's the word that's coming to my mind? No. And this is the ongoing problem in Charismania. When something is revealed, you don't get to try to salvage what you can. Okay? I'm going to go out on a limb here. Not really much of a limb, because it's biblically supported. Nobody received spiritual blessings from IHOP-KC. Do you know why? Because God was not involved in IHOP-KC. God had nothing to do with it. This was entirely the brainchild of Mike Bickle, Bob Jones, and Paul Kane, 3 horrifically sexually abusive men who left a trail of bodies behind them over 4 decades. There were no spiritual blessings. There was deception. There was maybe emotional, euphoria at times. There's no growth. Not within the IHOP-KC model. Just like, I say about like Joel Osteen. Nobody gets saved at Joel Osteen. It's churching. It's impossible. You know why? Because he doesn't preach the gospel. Nobody gets saved without the preaching of the gospel, according to the Bible. But people can, use that platform and want to seek God further and find a good church or a good preacher and really hear the gospel and get saved. But that person is saved in spite of Joel Osteen, not because of it. And it's the same thing here. So maybe there are people who went to IHOP-KC, and as a result of that, they found more legitimate sources of theology and heard the gospel and got saved and experienced growth. But that's in spite of IHOP-KC. It's not because of it. You don't get spiritual blessings from rotten fruit. Okay? The man who ran and founded IHOP-KC had a 4-year relationship, 2 different 4-year relationships, one with a 12-year-old and one with a 13-year-old, one of which he used to go to their high school to leave them little gifts in their lockers. And everybody in the high school knew that this creepy old man was her boyfriend. The 19-year-old was a daughter of a family friend who he seduced by lying to her and saying that God told him his wife was going to die so they could be together. So exactly where do you see, Sam, where do you see that would result in spiritual blessings for somebody? Because it wouldn't. I know that we want to, it's kind of like the donkey analogy that everybody, well, God used a donkey. That doesn't mean that you get to make an ass of yourself. Okay? We need to be realistic. IHOP-KC was a cesspool. And by the way, it was a cesspool long before this story broke. Long before it. We can go back to 2012, 2013, and talk about the murder of Bethany Deaton from the cult-like behavior of the people that she was involved with at IHOP-KC. We can go back to 2019 when they had hired somebody who was a admitted sexual abuser of minors, but because they felt that he had repented enough that he could be restored, and they defended it. We can go back and look at the horrifically bad Jesus is my boyfriend worship that came out of IHOP-KC. We can look at the Joel End Time Army theology. We can look at the bridal paradigm theology. There's never been anything positive. And by the way, Just go back and read the testimony of the people that survived, the people that escaped, I should say. Because they've been telling the story for decades that this was a cult. This was not the Church of Jesus Christ. It never was, not one scintilla of it. So there were no spiritual blessings and growth, because what that does is it furthers the abuse of the people that were there. Now, granted, not all of them were sexually abused. Not all of them directly interacted with Bickle. Not all of them maybe had in their minds negative experiences. But that doesn't mean that they were spiritually blessed or they had growth. It just means that they avoided some of the more harsh consequences of going to IHOP-KC. But who really knows the depth of the spiritual abuse and hurt that they had that they may not even realize, because they're still under the false teaching of Mike Bickle and IHOP-KC. And I might add, without the gospel, once again, they ain't saved. That's the real sin. They need to go to a regular church, hear the actual gospel, and give their life to Christ, and stop with this, performative Kundalini spirit, prayer room nonsense that they've been fed. Are there people that look back on their time at IHOP with fond memories? I'm sure there are. That does not make them godly. Does not make them spiritually correct. We can have fond memories of art. There are plenty of people who start off, let's say, at Joel Osteen Church or Joseph Prince's church, and they come out of it and they come out of the darkness into the light. But their memories of their time there, probably not like always. It didn't necessarily always have to be negative. So once again, the problem that I had, first of all, it's the only paragraph in this whole apology that doesn't fit, because it reveals that while he may be sorry, he still doesn't get the point. And there's no reason to coddle this anymore. The people at IHOP-KC are victims. They are victims of false teaching, false theology, and now it is time for us to, rally around them and try to preach the actual gospel to them, not continue to foment the nonsense that they've been taught for the last 4 decades. That's actually the responsible thing to do. But the problem is that the charismanical church, always seeks to protect the brand. And that's what you saw when the Bickle thing first came out. Everybody wanted to save Bickle. Then all of a sudden the minor accusations came out and everybody wanted to save IHOP-KC. And then they realized that they tried to rebrand it. They were going to, then Ticken was exposed as trying to do that. They backed off of it quickly. And then at the end of the day, at the last thing that they wanted to try to survive and salvage is the 24/7 prayer movement, because it sounds pious, but it doesn't matter. It's not pious. It was part of the falsity. It was demonic from day one, what they make these kids do. And, just extended hours of like performative travailing, forcing people to, I'm telling you, read the report from Firefly. It is stunning what they did to these kids, forcing them to always talk about their sexual indiscretions, and then of course they would be abused by their leaders, or they would, or their private testimony that they gave was being offered publicly in the prayer room. Not to mention the obvious mystic elements within the prayer room that are just common knowledge. The Kundalini spirit, the chanting. It was nothing of Jesus. It was nothing of the gospel. And this one little paragraph, these 2 sentences within this apology, reveal that Sam may be sincere, but he still remains sincerely wrong. And that brings us to what might be the last story. Is Donald Trump the modern day Nehemiah? I know the answer to that one. No. He's not. No. Just like he wasn't the modern day King Cyrus or the modern day, King Jehu. Um, I only wanted to bring this up because of the sheer stupidity of it, and what people are willing to buy into for their idolatry. Um, you know, in this article, previously Charismania and Chris Reed, who was absurdly false prophet, who was just busted for having an affair with his wife, right? Left Morning Star Ministries. How bad is your situation that you're not good enough for Morning Star Ministries? Just out of curiosity. Discussed how the walls around the borders of nations are not immoral in the way some describe them to be, but rather they can be used for protection of people against evil and harm. Being prepared against the enemy out of wisdom is godly and not wrong. Yeah, the only problem with that is that the people who are seeking asylum and the refugees are not evil people. And they're not the enemy. So I just want you to imagine standing before Christ on Judgment Day and trying to explain how your Christian responsibility was to make sure people didn't sneak into your country. And also, you and me, we did nothing to earn being born in this country. Absolutely nothing. We won the where were you born lottery, basically. But other people didn't. And other people got stuck being born in countries that are run by criminal organizations, gangs, dictators, and sometimes they get so desperate to try to have a life, they come here. And then they want to go for asylum and they want to go through because those are the legal routes. And our government makes it so difficult for them to do that they then get even more desperate and they sneak into this country. And we can have a separate conversation on immigration because, I think everybody knows the system is kind of broken. But this abuse of scripture to say that, if people will go back to Old Testament verses where, God designed the borders of the land of Israel and say, see, we're supposed to have borders. If that's what you have to do to try to explain your support for this obviously unchristian behavior, then good luck. Good luck explaining it to Jesus, because you ain't going to be able to. If you read the Gospels of Jesus Christ and think, who would he deport? I don't know what you're reading. I just don't. And again, this before the whataboutisms come in, this is not about having control of our immigration. I agree, there's no problem in doing that. As a nation, not as a Christian, part of our ideology. Lance Wallnau also told Charisma how powerful the life of Nehemiah is. So if your reference point is Lance Wallnau, the Seven Mountains Mandate idiot, I go back to the Paula White point. I go back to the John MacArthur point. If you don't, if you find yourself on the same stage with Lance Wallnau, maybe you need to ask why you're there. Or Mario Murillo, another absolutely lunatic psycho, who wrote before the election that if you were planning on voting Democratic, you were going to hell. You were unredeemable, beyond the redemption of Jesus Christ, based upon a carnal vote. I mean, that's better than Jack Hibbs. Jack Hibbs actually said even if you didn't vote at all, if you were planning on staying home, you were going to hell. That's idolatry, guys. That's a cult-like behavior. So even if you don't consider Donald Trump himself to be like Nehemiah, it's quite plausible to see Nehemiah-like traits. I don't remember Nehemiah raping anybody. That's funny. I just don't. I don't remember Elijah, like Mark Driscoll, if I remember, said that Elijah's in the White House. I don't remember Elijah being convicted 34 times. I don't remember him declaring bankruptcy 6 times. I don't remember him being caught on tape saying that he liked to grab women by their genitals because he was famous. Just stop. Stop being the stupid people. And again, this is not a political discussion. This is a Christian biblical discussion. Okay? If you come to the conclusion that Donald Trump is the best person for this country to lead it, fine. You have the carnal right to that decision. What you do not have the right to do is to wrap it up in Jesus Christ and pretend that it's God's decision, that God somehow is, and you can't, I mean, 80% of what's on Charisma News is nothing short of pure deification, idolatry of Donald Trump. That's it. So, and this Nehemiah article is only, a microcosm of the silliness that passes today in the church for Christian behavior and what it is they support. And, it's indicative, again, of how far the church has fallen. So, at the end of the day, every single election is only the lesser of two evils. And your choice of that lesser is just your choice. It's your best guess. Doesn't mean you're right. But even if you were, even if you happen to be right, it's still evil. So what are you advocating for? I think it was Spurgeon who once said, when given the choice of two evils, I choose neither. The last idol of the church age is NAR dominionism, in my opinion. It will be the thing that most people in Matthew 7 who stand before Christ and say, Lord, Lord, most people will fit into this bucket. They'll be like, Lord, Lord, but I don't understand. Didn't I, repost and retweet, how bad, immigrants were in your name? Didn't I compare Donald Trump to Nehemiah or Elijah? This is not a joke. This is not a minor thing. So those are the four stories from today and yesterday. I was trying to decide what's to write about. This week was pretty big with the Bicklegate report, and then on top of that we had the Bethel. Bethel finally put out a statement about Sean Bowles. I guess I can briefly finish with that. I did a devotional on it. Their statement was horrifically bad. It was. Hang on a second. For those who don't know, Sean Bowles was the resident prophet dude at Bethel for many, many years, going back to 2015, 14, whatever. And what Sean liked to do was he would fake words of knowledge. Everybody knew this. I was writing about this back in 2016, I think, if I remember correctly. And what he would do is he would mine people's social media accounts, and he would find information about them, and then people who he knew would be at his event that night. And then he'd pretend God was giving him information, words of knowledge. And he did this because it increased his profile as a prophet, which directly relates to more being able to make more money. Because at the end of the day, this is always about a grift. So I don't know if you can see the picture there, but that's him actually reading his smartphone as he's giving words of knowledge. Like he wasn't even trying to hide it. At least somebody like Peter Popoff back in the day had a microphone in his ear, and his wife, I think, was feeding him the information about people. Sean was like, nah, no reason to do that. So basically, it came to light that back then there was a case of a woman named Jubilee Dawn who was dating a man for a month. And that man went to a Bowles event, and Bowles had already strip mined his social media, saw that his girl's name was Jubilee, and said, "Oh, God is showing me the number 50, and I know 50 means Jubilee, spiritually. But does that mean anything to you?" That's how evil and insidious Sean Bowles was. And of course, the guy was like, "Wow, that's my girlfriend." And Sean's like, "Oh, praise the Lord. He's showing me that he's giving her to you." That's what his statement was. The man showed the tape to Jubilee, and Jubilee bought it, and they both bought into it, and they both got married after 1 month of dating. And then he proceeded to almost kill her. Spitting on her, choking her half to death, cutting her off from her family. But she stayed because in her mind, it was of God, right? because the prophet dude had a word of knowledge of something that, there's no way he could know, right? And that word of knowledge is why they got married. So there was this constant sense that she would be disobeying God if she got out of the marriage. But then, thankfully for her, he almost killed her one more time through choking her to death. And she said that's enough, and she got out. And now, of course, she realizes that she was deceived, and Sean Bowles essentially almost killed her. So she's been putting out social media posts, YouTube videos, and, bringing to light in a much more personal sense what we've all been saying for the last, 10 years. Sean Bowles was a fraud. He's not special in terms of frauds when it comes to Bethel, because Bill Johnson's a fraud. Chris Valentin's a fraud. They're just, I guess, not as much in your face. So this whole story blew up, and Bethel was like quiet as a church mouse. They weren't saying anything. And then they finally put out this absurd statement that is all over the place, contradicts themselves left and right. It did help that Chris Valentin was texting with somebody back in 2020, and somebody released those texts where he basically admitted that Sean Bowles was a false prophet and that he had warned all of his ministry partners to stay away from him, but they never warned the church. They never gave any statement to their sheep. And they still kept selling his stuff in their bookstore. And now they're trying to pretend in the statement, oh, well, we did all of our due diligence back then. We really had no control over him because he wasn't an employee. There's only so much we can do. And then, of course, there's a video from 2023 with Bill Johnson appearing with Sean Bowles on TBN, and they're talking about the silly book that he wrote in 2015, Translating God. And the interviewer asked Bill, because he wrote the foreword, and Johnson said that, wow, the book is fantastic, but when you consider the life that's behind it, it points to Sean, it just makes it more powerful. So, well, which is it then? Why were you still trying to grift with him if you knew 3 years earlier that he was a false prophet? And more importantly, why did none of this raise to the level of concern enough to want to protect your sheep? Now, I know. It's a rhetorical question because Bill Johnson is actually considered the people at Bethel as sheep. They're his marks. They're, Chris Valentin, Mr. Poverty Mindset, they're just his marks. That's all they are. They're how many ways can I shake the last coin out of the pocket of the sheep? It is what it is, right, guys? If you think there's anything redeemable from Bethel Church in Redding, California, I don't know what to tell you. I really don't. There is not a false theology that they do not embrace. Word faith, yep. Prosperity, yep. Full signs and lying wonders, well, heck, they're the ones who created the glory cloud. They have a dead raising team. They did grave sucking. They believe in divine healing, which usurps the sovereignty of God and says that God must always heal us, even though, sadly, Bill's wife passed away from cancer. I don't know what happened there. But basically, the divine healing theory would be that I guess she didn't have enough faith, which I would never say about Betty Johnson. I think the problem is she had cancer, and sometimes you could pray. We could always pray. But sometimes, quite frankly, a lot of times, the answer is no. And we don't know necessarily why, but our faith is in the no. Our faith can't just be in the yes. Our faith has to be, if God says you're coming home, God says you're coming home. But not if you're trying to sell divine healing. So the point being is that there's literally nothing that Bethel Church does not support that is correct. So, at any rate, so they put out the statement, which only furthered to prove that they have always been in complete cahoots with Sean Bowles. They used Sean used them. They promoted Sean, they platformed Sean, and then when the false prophecies hit the fan and the word of knowledges were exposed, they deceptively, behind the scenes, warned the people that they grift with to not do any business with them anymore. But they didn't tell anybody else. They didn't tell anybody else in the church. So it's been quite a busy, crazy week. But, I thank you for sharing a little bit of time with me. And until we meet again, test everything, hold fast.